what the city is talking about. This is Montreal Now on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
That is James MENNIE. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, might as well start with the Premier, who came out from wherever he's been for the past week or so. Haven't heard a whole lot from Francois Legault, but we did today. So I want to start off by, first of all, reacting to that OQLF study. So remember, this is a study that basically showed that, in fact, nothing much has changed. I think, and I did this story earlier this afternoon, right? So the number is 79%, right? Is the proportion of those using only French in Quebec's public places. That level has remained stable since 2007. So much for the fact that French is in decline. But when the Premier was asked about this study today, this is what he said.
Yeah, it's a good news. We have to make sure that the next reports say the same thing, because some experts, they say that it's doubtful. I don't know.
Yeah, he don't know. Look, this is the OQLF study. This is not a couple of guys working at some place, underground, yet he still refuses to acknowledge that, hey, things are okay. What did you think?
Well, that's the narrative. And in fact, you and I talked, it's amazing because we're hearing about this report again. You and I talked about this report last week.
Yeah.
This is the same report that determined most people in Quebec, if they were using French, it was dealing with the provincial government or talking to the food delivery guy. If they used English, they were dealing with the federal government and talking to the food delivery guy. But all that said, the Premier has basically tipped his hand. He's made it clear. It doesn't matter what anyone says. Even the OQLF, it doesn't matter. As long as there is someone who will say the French language is in danger, the French language is in danger. This is Francois Legault's main witch doctor's rattle politically that allows him to run around and tell people we have to do A, B, and C because the language is in danger, the culture is in danger, the identity is in danger, we're going to be steamrolled, we'll be turned into Louisiana. It is all rubbish. His own office for surveying the progress or lack of saying of French is saying it's pretty much status quo, which when you consider the increase in population is excellent news for the French language in Quebec. This does not fit Francois Legault's narrative of fear. It doesn't fit his narrative that Quebecers, white Francophone Quebecers, are under siege by the rest of the world. So as long as he is in power, as long as he has enablers in the press and in academia who will turn around and say, oh, yes, don't be fooled by these figures, because they could change in an instant, we will always have this uncertainty. And Quebecers will quite literally be poorer for it.
All right, that's one aspect to the story today from the Premier. The other, of course, is this notion, and we're going to talk more about this after, I guess, this idea about, look, we can't get what we want from the federal government on immigration. And so how about I threaten the federal government with a referendum in Quebec on this? Had we ever heard this before?
Not since 1995. You remember he campaigned on it. And then when the PQ, he campaigned on the idea of holding a referendum on immigration jurisdiction. When the PQ called him on it, he became far more conciliatory. I got to tell you, this is a huge story, and our listeners have a lot at stake here because we are essentially seeing a face-off between two populist politicians who basically are dealing with huge egos, okay, and who are in desperate political shape. So my concern is when Francois Legault says, and you didn't hear it in English, but in French he said, we'll have a referendum on immigration, among other things, okay? It's clear he's throwing down. I think he has at once tried to cut the Gordian knot of his own unpopularity. He can turn around and say, I either have the support of Quebecers or not. If he loses this referendum, he has a dignified way to leave office after what has been a disastrous 6 months for his government. And if he wins, well, he's a strong man. If Trudeau, loses or if he folds, and I think to a certain extent, Francois Legault is counting on Justin Trudeau's demonstrable political cowardice when it comes to Quebec. He'll just give him the whole story because Quebec is his last holdup, his last area of apparent support. So it's kind of no lose for him. He either wins his issue, he wins the referendum, or better still, by June 30th, he gets Trudeau to cave once again. Or, he'll go through the whole 9 yards. And if he loses, we'll say, listen, I did my best. Now I have to leave and not look at bad poll numbers anymore.
You know, the fact that he's bringing this up now, and this is interesting, maybe just for me, in the sense that there's an announcement from Justin Trudeau every single day, and there's another one, of course, today. And I'm wondering, is this the time Francois Legault senses there's some weakness here, or that, as you said, Jim, maybe at this point, when you bring up the idea of holding a referendum, because Justin Trudeau was so focused on offering, something different every day to someone, he just simply goes ahead and says, well, you know what, if that's how it has to be, then perhaps that should be, and offer that, I guess, as something to Francois Legault. Go ahead and do it.
When I mentioned desperation, I think it applies to both of them, and I think what you suggested is extremely, extremely possible. But for certain, and I don't think it was only yesterday that a lot of people in this country realized just how ridiculously weak a politician Justin Trudeau actually is, and just how absolutely indecisive and hitting every button on the control panel, hoping that it's going to, make the Liberal aircraft pull out of its crash dive. I think this is, on the one hand, a smart move, and I'm using that in air quotes, by Francois Legault, because I don't think a referendum in this country, or especially in Quebec, is smart for anybody. I think it's terrible news for our listeners. I think it's terrible news for Anglophones and for immigrants, for the people that Francois Legault has spent the past 6 months pointing the finger at and perceiving as a threat, because you are going to hear more and more of this, Aaron. You're going to hear more. When you hear him talking today about immigration, 560,000 is Justin Trudeau's fault, but he is turning these numbers into an existential threat for Quebecers. And even if half of the Quebec population rolls their eyes and says, could you give it up? If the other half buys into it, we're going to have huge problems. We are still facing tremendous economic challenges. We have a labor shortage, and the only way this entire issue seems to be headed is right into a brick wall. And I'm not very comfortable at all with the idea that there's even more onus or opprobrium being shoveled onto immigrants who chose Quebec, that for some reason they are the cause of the problems. They are a problem that needs to be solved. I really, really get uncomfortable with that kind of politics.
All right, let me move on. I want to get this in because we're here a day after the eclipse. You're suggesting it's great to see how much good came from this, or how much was inspired by the eclipse. Where we go from here?
Well, it's kind of scary, actually, because, you and I had the conversation. Everyone's had the conversation. But isn't it amazing how absolutely amazed we were by this utterly predictable phenomenon, but just this idea of bon ami, this idea of interacting with other people. It suggests perhaps that maybe, I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't think you're going to adopt a law to force people to be happy, but maybe I think if one person out of 10 who went to watch the eclipse spends more time talking to other people, less time on their screen, and perhaps a little more time just appreciating what's happening around them than happening on the far side of the world on Twitter, I think we're all going to be much, much better off.
If only that were the case. I think this is one of those situations, Jim, where a day later it's like it never happened.
Well, if people like you keep stomping on my dream, Aaron, then I guess it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, Jim, I suggest we go to Luxor, Egypt in August of 2027 to see the total eclipse that's going to be happening there that day, which I was talking about earlier. Their path of totality is going to last almost 7 minutes.
And there's a lot of the imagery for Dark Side of the Moon is based on Egypt. So
is it?
This is so cool. It's a date. We're there.
There you go. All right. It's a long drive. James Mennie over at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
At the Mount.